Boops are eternal. Boop the Snoot. Chapter 4. Nighttime Blues.
We will need to speak to you. We will arrive as soon as we can.
You just snored yourself awake, and it felt unnaturally sudden, like something had just blocked your throat for just a moment. Weirdly enough, this wasn't really the first time that this happened. Sleep since you arrived in Equestria had both been a bit more violent, and also a lot more peaceful. You never really asked about it, just thinking it was like an atmospheric thing. God knows any trip to the country put you out like a light. But now you've realized that this sudden awakening only tends to happen when you're dreaming, or, well, sometimes when you're dreaming, to be accurate. Even then, you don't really remember any of those dreams, only waking up suddenly and feeling just out of it. Maybe you should have actually asked more questions after you arrived, or, well, during any discussion with Twilight. You were probably just distracting yourself with humor, as you usually did, or, well, just being pissed off. I mean, both were great distractions anyway. You don't really want to know how long you've been distracting yourself, considering your little, outburst the other day. This time alone definitely hasn't really done you any good. Equestria, it's great, sure, but after they told you that there was no way out, you might have already been a bit too far gone. And, to think, everyone would always say, "Oh, I could survive being flung from home, I'd take it with stride." You might have been one of them once, but theory and practice are two very different things. And now, you kinda want some company now. Even if they don't want to laugh about something, and even if you, well, didn't really like them. Just anything but the silence, anything but these thoughts. You'd even take Mr. Edge, specifically and especially if he made your aching sides go away. But, yet again, why do you feel like you're forgetting something? The clock reads 2:08 a.m. It was, what was it, 10 when you woke up? At least back then. There was still some activity outside, though. Staring out the window had allowed at least a small reprieve from your thoughts, but only being able to see the moon out didn't really help all that much, particularly when it came to noticing how different the craters were. There weren't really any giant ones, just tiny dotted holes that made odd constellations every 16th or two. Man, what you'd do to see the mare and the moon gathering, even if the thought of something so preposterous was still bothering you. You still don't understand why this response to Equestria was so delayed. You were fully aware of it, but at the same time, you didn't really do anything about it. Hell, you couldn't even laugh in spite of it anymore. Staring at the moon like that was even more draining than dealing with a weird tension before you even fell asleep. And not to mention how familiar, but not everything was getting as the hours passed. The night was just so depressing. And that was coming from a professional insomniac, too. You weren't really sure you wanted company anymore. I mean, from all the pain that you were feeling, it was also nice to clear your mind like this. Sure, being a humorous ass was a desirable trait for someone from another world, but you certainly fit that role a bit too often. And having some time just to cool down, especially after the Boops incident, yeah, that definitely felt great. Still, even if you wanted to decompress, who would you do it with? Twilight? She's mostly just the researcher to your test subject, except with some occasional role reversal. It's not as lewd as it sounds. The list about ended there already. You were really that lonely, huh? The only human. Wait, what were you even doing for the past 3 years? I mean, sure, one of them was definitely filled with a big distraction. Ponyville was filled with laughing ponies being booped, graced by Floofington II, and you were... You can't even twist that in any other way. It was like you were stuck in a VR game, forever doomed to just interact with NPCs for the rest of your life. It didn't really help that the residents here were decidedly non-human as well. I mean, you just can't throw away an entire life worth of assuming one species is the smartest of them all. That doesn't really happen. So you, the lonely ape, spent a time surrounded by your lessers, had a nice few laughs, and did nothing else except to try to fill the hole in your heart with a dog named after the likeness of the great Floofington I. For at least 2 years, you were pissed off as a defense from your thoughts, and for the rest, well, you were distracted. But God, he was just He was the true best doggo in the multiverse. You know what, may his soul rest in peace. Anyway, so what happens now? Do you try and actually make friends? Do you drop the whole booping thing for strangers entirely? No, seriously, you actually have no real idea of where to go from here. Time to think can be great, sure, but it can also really get frustrating. It really can. You know, maybe it's just time to close your eyes and just maybe let your brain process this throughout the night, or, well, the rest of the night, you guess. You know, maybe the darkness actually will be your friend this time. And you actually really like that. You could actually go to sleep with a smile now. Well, you think. Silence followed her summons. Luna had made the simple mistake of acting in haste. I mean, she believed that she could have had a discussion with Anonymous much earlier in the night, perhaps even pardoning her of her hasty actions in days past. But moving with such haste to demonstrate her abilities might have damaged this soul more than she intended. She simply wanted to prove that she could handle a simple task, officially mobilize her knights out of more than chariot-pulling duty. Obviously, she hasn't even screened them well enough, as former officer Ditzy Sky would know. Perhaps as a lower, she could earn her place again. Though, there was also a dilemma of what to do about this individual involving his dreams. They were hardly pretty constructs, frequently demonstrating a chaos worthy to impress the spirit himself, or filled with emotions she could simply describe as repressed. How deep it went, she had yet to find, yet that one dream involving that Cold War was oddly off-putting. Even worse, she didn't even know how to approach Anonymous in any reasonable fashion. The individual seemed to have the ability to erode her shell, and she was rather embarrassed to admit that in most of her quicker actions the other day, and that was just simply due to his rather respectful yet also not way of addressing her over her hidden shames. You know, perhaps it would be better to let her sister help him? I mean, she already spoke highly of him, even if she only met him once. Her sister was still the most bizarre pony she'd ever met. Yet asking her sister for help simply due to his nature, well, that hardly sounded like something any self-respecting princess should do. She could deal with one resident, surely, right? I mean, he already seemed quite positive on the outside already, and surely that would, to some extent, affect the rest of him, correct? Ooh, a pit formed in her stomach. I mean, she knew very well how masks worked, how strong they could be as emotions built up inside where pressure has to be handled by hardening in the facade. Was she about to open the gates of Tartarus? Probably. So was she about to back down? Oh, no, absolutely not. She was one of the proud diarchs of Equestria, regardless of her personal feelings on the matter. As the Princess of the Night and Warden of Dreams, she would accomplish her duties. And now the pit was growing as the seconds passed. I mean, she could come back later.